Hello and welcome to episode 230 of Page One, the Writers Podcast. I'm Marco.
I'm Tarek.
And thanks for joining us on the podcast where we like to speak to writers of all kinds about their writing careers, find out how they got into the industry and try and get as many hints and tips from them as possible. If this is your first time joining us, please do check out the back catalogue. There's hundreds of great guests that we've had on now, authors, screenwriters, comic writers, video game writers and much more. Yeah. So please do check that out. But also Tarek, check out our new podcast.
Oh, Adventures in Publishing Land.
Indeed. We have created, founded a network of podcasts that we're hoping will grow and be a sort of one-stop shop for writing and publishing podcasts that we're calling Step Podcasts. You can get the details in the podcast description. And as part of that, we're doing a joint podcast with the host of one of the other podcasts on the network, Nadine Matheson. As Tarek says, it's called Adventures in Publishing Land, which is our sort of, irreverent look at the latest publishing news. And that's going to be sort of every couple of weeks that we bring out an episode of that, have a chat around the news and use the news sort of as a way in to talk about some big publishing or writing topics as well, I think. So, please do check that out if you haven't already. And that will be on its own. The first episode dropped in the Page One feed, but future episodes will be on its own feed. I'll put it again in the podcast description, the feed, and you can subscribe to that if that sounds of interest, which I hope it does. It really helps. That's a new podcast, so it would really help us if you could subscribe, follow, like, share, all of these things, because it's very, very difficult for new podcasts to find a footing and get discoverability. So the more people that can do that, we would be supremely grateful for that. But enough about us. Let's talk about this week's brilliant guest.
Yeah. This week we are chatting with the wonderful Beth Lewis, who her latest book is The Rush, just out in the last week or so at time of recording, and it's a really wonderful book. It's a western set during the gold rush in North America, and the way I always think about it when I was reading it, what I kept thinking about was Deadwood meets Red Dead Redemption, that kind of crush of,
but told from a female perspective.
But told from a female perspective, yeah. So 3 females all involved in the gold rush, drawn to this town in Canada for their own reasons, and then a murder that kind of draws them together. So it's got that really cool crime story underpinning it in this really great historical setting with the western theme running through it. It's a fantastic book.
Yeah. So we talk about the research that Beth did to write that one, and also a really, really interesting discussion about. These are essentially, she's telling stories of women. They're fictional characters, but some of them at least are based on real characters, real people. Women that were a big part of this, but of course you don't hear about that. You only hear the focus of these stories is always on the men. So it's really interesting to hear about what actually the situation was like back then. So it's a fun and fascinating chat. So we'll get straight into it after a quick advert for a writer's notebook. Before we do, I will, as always, just mention our Patreon, which you can support us on. There's different tiers that you can support. There's a free one. You can just join our Discord. Otherwise, there's different tiers that get you early access to episodes, video of the interviews if it's an audio only episode, up to sort of free books, free notebooks and things like that. So please do check that out if you haven't already, as that does help support the podcast and help us to continue to grow as well. But enough from me. Tarek.
For now, on with the podcast.
The blank page. To some, it's terrifying, an obstacle to overcome. But we prefer to think of it as an opportunity, a blank canvas to be filled with all of the adventures and characters in our head. So how to overcome that fear? Well, we all know the best advice for a writer is write. Seriously, get words on the page and more will follow.
But what about later, when you start trying to pull those threads of what you've written together? What about the character you wrote about way back at the start? Who was she again? What was she carrying? And where did she leave the MacGuffin that she now really needs in the third act? Think about all those top thrillers you like to read, or that amazing drama you just watched. What did they all have in common? Structure and planning.
As aspiring writers ourselves, we've tried many different methods to try and organise all the thoughts about the stories we want to tell. We've been there searching for a piece of scrap paper to note something down, or making a quick note on our phone in between meetings.
Or sometimes we'll make a note in whatever notebook we're carrying, or a document on our laptop so we don't forget that great idea. Let's be honest, it can all be a bit messy and it's easy to lose track of everything. And that's when we realised it's not just the story that needs structure and planning, but the way we gather all of our thoughts about it as well.
And so we made Page One. Page One is more than just another notebook. It's a place to put down all your ideas for your latest project, divided into easy-to-use sections that will help you plan your story, so that when that blank page comes calling, you're ready to answer. And then afterwards, once it's written, we realised you need to plan how to let people read it, so we included a section relating to submissions.
Each one is designed for one project, whether you want to write a book, screenplay, a comic, or any other kind of story. We truly believe that when you use it, it will help you get to the main event, writing your story. So we hope this helps.
We can't wait to read what you come up with.
And remember, every story starts with Page One.
Did you always want to be a writer? Because I think I'm right in saying that you have had a varied career, including a juggler at one point.
I didn't make any money off that. Very few do. But no, I did spend a few summers of my teens at touring festivals, doing circus skills and juggling and things like that.
Nice.
But no, I did always want to be a writer, always. Except for a brief stint where I wanted to be a marine biologist, but I realised I was rubbish at science, so back to writing.
Marine biologist is a funny one. I had friends that wanted to be, like, it's a career that appeals to kids. I think it must be the idea of swimming with dolphins or something like that.
Working on warm beaches.
Yeah.
I grew up by the sea, so it was I loved it. So it was very much go and do that. But no, I'd much rather write stories about them than actually do science.
And you, I read somewhere you used to write stories as a kid and make them into little books and stuff. Like you obviously, you loved to kind of you wanted to see it as a finished product, as a book at the end of it.
Yeah, it was funny actually. I did that. I think most kids do that at some point. Mainly, my daughter's doing it at the moment. She's nearly 6, and she's creating these little books and stories, which is lovely. She says she wants to become a writer, and I'm gently trying to dissuade her from that. But I think we all do. But I remember very vividly, I started writing the quintessential awful YA fantasy novel that I think every writer goes through as a sort of coming of age activity. And I did that, and then I drew my sketch for the cover for it. And at the bottom, I put the logo for HarperCollins because I was like, I want to be published by HarperCollins. My first book deal was with HarperCollins. It was a very lovely thing. But yeah, I just always wanted to be a writer. So I went into publishing because it's the closest thing to books.
Okay.
And were you, you always wanted to be a writer. You went into publishing, but were you writing on the side at that point? Were you still, so you were developing your stories. So, I mean, did you go through that process that, many people go through of sending stuff out, 3 chapters, getting rejections, all that process? I did all of that. Being in publishing had absolutely no benefit to me whatsoever in that respect. I sent out 4 novels to various agents, probably got 200 rejections in all before I sent out my debut to agents, and then suddenly it was, this is all right.
So
we like this.
The Wolf Road was your first book that was actually published. That was your 5th book you'd actually written.
Yeah.
And when you look back at those first 4, do you see it's obvious to you now why they didn't get anywhere, that you're still learning the craft almost?
I mean, definitely the awful fantasy one. That just, we don't talk about that. But the other 4, 2 of them were trying to write to a market that just it just wasn't right. And then the other two just weren't of that level. But I think I needed to write them to be able to find where I was as a writer and what I wanted to be, and find my voice, which sounds really pretentious, but it's true, to then be able to write The Wolf Road.
Yeah.
And how has your approach to writing, your process, if we can also again sound pretentious, has that changed over time as well?
Yes, yeah, it has. I used to, I mean, having a child did force that to happen, but I look back at those first couple of novels and it was all very, sitting in cafes and spending a Saturday whiling it away, and it was very, it was disciplined, but not to the point of this is work. Mm-hmm. But now it's much more. I get up at 5 o'clock every morning through the week to write for 2 hours before my daughter wakes up. And it's become a kind of ritual thing now, where that's my writing time, and then maybe I'll get a Saturday every other week or something to go and sit in that cafe. But I think I'm much more sort of professional about it now than I was, but that's 8-9 books in now, so it's...
And so you're kind of writing days up at 5 a.m, do a couple of hours writing, and then the day job, as you said, you work in publishing. Am I right in saying you're the publishing manager at Rebellion at the moment? Is that?
I'm publishing director at Rebellion.
Sorry, okay. What's the difference? Have I created a job that doesn't exist?
No, I was publishing manager.
Okay.
But then I got promoted.
Right. Okay. Cool. So. Congratulations.
Publishing director, which is a pretty full-on job. I oversee all the fiction, the graphic novels, the comics, and the board games.
Cool. Okay. So that's a 5-day job, pretty much?
Yep, 5-day, 9 to 5.
So your 5 to 7 hour, that's your kind of key writing point?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That's my writing time, yeah. And then I try and do the kind of incidentals of writing, the kind of admin of responding to emails and giving cover feedback and social media posts and podcasts and things like that in my work day, which we don't try and fit it in my lunch hour.
And it's just staying on your process for a moment. You get up and you do the writing every day, and as you say, it's almost become a bit of a ritual, which I think developing some sort of habit about writing is quite important, whether it is every day or but I think so you don't keep putting it off. Having that habit definitely helps. But do you plan out your novels beforehand, or do you just have an idea and just start writing to see where it takes you?
I wish I was a planner. I feel like it cause me a lot less heartache if I was, but no, I'm not at all. I have a vague shape of the novel that I want to write in my head, and usually 1 or 2 key beats that I want to hit, like key scenes or plot points that I know I want to go this way, like someone goes missing or there's a murder, obviously. So I have that, but it's kind of like, when you watch a movie and then a week later you think back to that movie and you get the vague shape of what it was and the story, but you can't remember individual scenes or dialogue or characters or things like that. That's what I have at the beginning of a novel. Okay. Yeah. So it's the best way I've found to describe it, because it is a very vague thing, and then it sort of becomes clear as I'm going through it. But no, I'm not a planner until probably about the last quarter of it, where I actually have to make it make sense.
And then does that mean that your first draft is quite messy and your redrafts are no? Okay. Very clean first draft?
Yeah, I really try and make sure that I go back and edit what I've done the previous day for the first sort of 20 minutes of that chunk of time I have, and then make it make sense or change things that I don't like. So I don't like not having a solid foundation, because going back to the beginning after 100,000 words and changing something is so much work to then pull it through the rest of the book. And I'm, Tarek knows we have the same editor, and she is very diligent on those things, so would very much pull us up on it.
So then what happens if you get like, you're kind of pantsing it a little bit and you kind of know roughly where you're going, and you get like 60, 70,000 words in, and you want to make a change, or you don't like where the last 20,000 words have taken you, would you just wipe them, jump back, and then continue on again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would. I wouldn't finish it, because then it's finishing it from a bad place. It's like having a rotten tooth in your mouth, and I need to get rid of it before I can focus on the next bit. Because if it doesn't feel right, or the character's done something that doesn't feel right, I have to change it before I carry on.
And with the writing every day thing, do you, with it being a habit, with it being a ritual, does that mean that you find it easy to get into the writing side of things, or do you have some days that are more difficult than others, even with that sort of habit?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, so I just started a new book last week, that it was hard to get back into it, and figure out where to start, and the initial direction of the scenes, and then the research. So some days I was just sitting on my laptop at 6 o'clock in the morning, just looking up random facts about whatever it was, and didn't actually do any writing, but doing the research, doing the quick Googling and things like that. It's all part of it, but it doesn't get the words down in the same way. So yeah, some days are very good, where I'll know the scene, I know what I'm doing, and I will write very quickly and get 1,000 or 2,000 words down before breakfast. But some days it's a complete slog.
Yeah.
And some days, if I haven't slept the night before and I've only had 2 hours sleep and my daughter's been up in the middle of the night, then I just might give it a miss.
Yeah. Because do you view, do you allow yourself that kind of permission that those 2 hours of writing don't have to be putting words on the page? Like it's still classed as writing, even if you're, as you say, looking up facts or just trying to work out the kind of finding the tone of it, or working out what the kind of rough story is going to be. That's all. Even just sitting there thinking, that's still classed as a good writing session.
Oh yeah. I mean, if I've spent those 2 hours finding a bunch of facts about women in the Wild West and have found a bunch of potential story seeds or characters or something, but I haven't actually added to my manuscript, it's still completely worthwhile. I think if you have too many days like that, then for me, I can get behind and start to get a bit stressed about deadlines, because I do have quite a finite amount of time. So if I'm going on holiday, for example, that's just that week gone, so there's no other time there. Or if my partner's away for a weekend, then that negates me going out for 3 or 4 hours to do something. So it's all about balance, and word targets are very useful for me. And I know I have to write 20,000 words a month to hit my deadline. And then I split it up into smaller chunks, this every week, this every day. And then it can really help keep me on track.
Okay.
And The Rush is your latest book. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah. The elevator pitch moment is always the most stressful moment for any of us. No, so The Rush is, it's my next novel. It's out on the 10th of June. And it is a story of the Klondike or Alaskan Gold Rush, set in 1898. It is about 3 women in that time who are all based on real women from that era. There is a journalist, Kate, who does the gold trail that all the miners went through, the kind of 600-mile trip to the gold fields in Dawson City. And she is doing that as a sort of lone woman with her dog. Then there's Ellen, who is a miner's wife in the gold fields, in the mud and the grime, and she is waiting for her husband to strike it rich, and it never quite seems to come. And then there's Martha, who is the hotelier hotel brothel, let's say, of Dawson City, and she has that perspective of the boom town, and she's got her own demon at the door in the form of a local criminal who's kind of buying up the whole town and wants her property, but she doesn't want to sell. And then a woman is murdered in that town, and all three women are brought together to solve it, and figure out what has happened and how their lives have intertwined in this completely wild, lawless space. Yeah.
It's I read it already, and it is fantastic. It's a really, really great Western. I loved it, and it's been getting really good quotes, good reviews. It's BBC Radio 2 book club pick. All that must be quite exciting to see before it even comes out.
Yeah, that was a real surprise, and just amazing. I think it very unexpected. I think I'm going in 2 weeks to record it as well, which I'm really scared about, but sure it'll be fine.
So what did they interview about it and just like have a nice
I
chat
have to go into the studio
and
cool. Sit with Sarah Cox and talk about my book, which seems completely surreal and weird. So I've been listening to a bunch of other ones thinking, oh, what's she going to ask me? But no, it's really, really exciting. And the response has been really good so far. It's great.
And you're, I think it's fair to say all your books have sort of varied. You've had crime, you've had speculative fiction, magic realism. This is Western. Do you enjoy exploring different types of stories? And do you, as the author, think that there is a through line between all of these, or are they completely different types of stories?
That's a good question. I think part of that difference in my writing career, I suppose, has been circumstantial, because I've had 2 book deals each time, and when you get a 2 book deal, you get it for the first one, and then the second one they want something quite of a piece, to encourage readers. So my first book was a kind of coming of age rural, I suppose that was a wilderness survival kind of book, and then my second one was more of a coming of age in a rural setting. So it kind of followed on. Then it was a contemporary, I suppose a contemporary women's fiction with a bit of a speculative magical realism edge to it. And the second one then followed on that was about a cult. And so this one is, it's a historical, so one would expect another historical afterwards. So I do love the freedom of being able to write wherever I want to. And I think in terms of a through line, there are some, in my first couple of books, there are some tiny little Easter eggs that connect the books together in a very David Mitchell kind of attempt, because I love that stuff, and they are there, but they are very subtle. But I think for me, the thing that would define a book by me is probably the voice is really important to me. I write all in first person and from different perspectives, so I always try and get an authentic voice in there and an emotional weight to it, I suppose. So
do you struggle when you're writing books first person from multiple perspectives? The thing that I always get stressed about is making the voices sound unique and distinctive. And I know you've talked before about trying to avoid that feeling of someone getting to a character and thinking, oh, this is the boring one. You want them all to have like agency and to have their plots being and so how do you solve that? How do you make all of them interesting and all of them pacey and unique sounding? How do you do it? What's
That's assuming they are.
I'd love to
know. That's a really good question. I think for me it comes down to their voices, and not just like the authorial voice of someone writing and knowing it's by that author, but the actual character's voice of how they speak, their accent, their their vocabulary, the kind of slang they use, their education level. You know, I've got characters in The Rush that Kate, for example, her voice is much quicker. It's more descriptive because she's a journalist. She's more direct with her speech because she needs to be, and she's got a fearlessness to her. Ellen is much more tentative because she's this kind of downtrodden young wife in a very hostile environment. And so she's got a much more kind of soft, lyrical voice to her that fits this kind of melancholy that she has. And then Martha's this, you know, she's this bolshy, strong tavern keeper, essentially, that who is very much captain of her own ship. So she's got this much more down-to-earth tone to her. She doesn't deal with airs and graces. She's very rough. And so immediately those voices come because those characters, that's just who they are. And so you can't have this rough and ready, low education person talking in this super eloquent way because it just doesn't work. Yeah. So I always try and think of the characters themselves and how they would speak, what they would know, where they would get their cultural references from, and their in-jokes and that kind of thing to make them unique.
And presumably that gets easier as you go through the book because you get to know these characters, so it's probably easier to slip into those POVs as you
absolutely.
write it. Yeah.
I do try and set up a quite distinct voice in the first chapters, a very kind of almost, here's an example of this character's most colloquial encounter, you know, to be able to really cement that. And then once you've got that first impression down with the reader, it's a lot easier to move it around a bit, to be a little bit more flexible with that.
I wanted to ask about, you know, you're writing a Western book with this one here, and the kind of Western genre, I suppose, is a wider thing. And it feels like when I was reading The Rush, the stuff that came to my mind was things like Deadwood, Red Dead Redemption, the video game. You know, was that, what kind of thing did you have? Did you have touchstones in mind? What did you do research about in media before?
I played a lot of Red Dead Redemption. The horse Bluebell.
Did that count as part of your 2-hour?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's all research. It's funny though because there are a few crime writers who are fans of that video game. The horse Bluebell. I love writing animals. It's really fun. But the horse Bluebell, she's named after Ruth Ware's Red Dead Redemption.
Right.
Which I love. But Red Dead was one, and it helped because it is so good that it gives you this immersive sense of what it kind of can feel like in that setting, even though it's a video game. I do think it's some video games can be a very legitimate source of research, because they've had a team of 300, 400 people doing that research and finding these sort of very realistic things to add in. Deadwood was also one. I love Deadwood. Then movies like and TV shows. There's loads of TV shows about the gold rush in general. There's one called Klondike that's really good. There's White Fang, Called Wild. All of those that are just real great ways to visualize certain aspects of those times, because I'm a bit, I don't rely on reading for research, especially novels, because I'm really scared of subconsciously taking in their descriptions or their phrases or their manner of speaking that then will find its way into my work when I don't want it to. So I kind of rely on a lot of the visual side of things.
And there are so many Western stories. You know, obviously it was once the biggest genre in terms of movies and stuff like that. But even since then, you know, Deadwood, things like Godless, 3:10 to Yuma.
Oh, I love Godless. Yeah.
Plenty of stuff like that. But, you know, there aren't many stories that are told from the point of view of women in that time. You know, it was all the cowboys and stuff. So, you know, from that aspect of it, was it difficult to find material to inform the story from that perspective?
There was a lot less, yeah. About 100,000 stampeders went to the gold rush in Klondike, and about 10% of them were women. Okay. So they did the route in the same way that the men did. They did all of that, and they had to do it in skirts and uncomfortable shoes and things like that. And there are a few kind of resources out there, a few websites out there that kind of go, oh, women of the Klondike, and it's the same list of 4 or 5 different women, which is great, but there's very little of them in there. It's just they own this business or were married to this man, and you know, Kate Carmack is one of them, and she was part of the trio who first discovered gold in the Klondike. But it's always the 2 men who get the attention for it, because she was just their wife and their brother, their sister. So I really wanted to center these women, because their stories were really interesting. Got, you know, a woman who Martha is based on, actually, called Belinda Mulroney. She owned a hotel in Dawson City, and she was such a canny entrepreneur that she would, at the end of the night, she would sweep up all of the dust off the floor and run it through a sluice box to get hundreds of dollars worth of gold that miners had just dropped on the floor. And she became a millionaire in that time, and was, you know, richest woman in the Klondike. And it's just, wow. You always hear about the male stories, and it's same with other westerns as well. So it's really refreshing to look at it from a different perspective.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because I think, as Margaret says, westerns, the ones that I always think about that I love watching as growing up and stuff, it was always the male point of view. And then even, you know, I think a lot of media nowadays, there's a kind of modern western. There's films which are set in modern day but have that kind of western vibe, you know, like Justified, or pretty much anything Taylor Sheridan does, 100-Year-Old Men, all these stuff. Like, it's still cowboy-y, it's still riding horses, it's still in the outback a little bit, but even though it's modern day and there's cars and stuff. But even those ones are still primarily from the male perspective. It feels like, you know, I mean, Godless, I suppose, has a few strong female characters in it, but that I can think off the top of my head. But then a lot of it is still, even the modern stuff, very focused on the male perspective.
Yeah. And I love those stories, and I love that, the kind of romance of the frontier and this new world and this sort of lawless environment. But yeah, you only ever see women as victims or wives, or just kind of along for the ride. And you might get the odd 1 or 2 who are really strong or can or independent, like in Godless, Michelle Dockery's character, I can't remember her name, but she's the kind of main female character in that. But she's kind of hated by the town because of that.
Yeah, and it's funny. There's the character of Beth in Yellowstone.
Yes,
is very, very strong, but she's also very polarizing. And you know,
I love her. I think she's one of my favorite characters on TV.
Yeah, I love her. My mum hates her, but my wife and I absolutely love her. But it's funny, because why is that then? Why do you think a female character in westerns have to be so kind of over the top almost, or just, you know?
Because most westerns are written by men, no offense, and they are written by men, and feminist politics coming into me, right? How do I say this? But yeah, no, it's the whole kind of history is written by men, so there is that perspective, and because in a lot of the areas that westerns take place, the more rural areas, the more patriarchal society ideals are still very much in place, even in the modern day. And I think that some people write strong female characters as being strong like a man is strong.
Yeah.
So Beth, for example, she's written like a man would be. You know, she's violent, she's got temper, she's angry, she's rude, and she's got those kind of quintessential non-feminine characteristics, which make her such an interesting character, but do make her quite difficult to like, because I don't know how to say it without being mean, but she is a strong female character from a male point of view, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I can see that. Yeah.
Whereas it's different writing a strong female character from a female point of view. They're quite different in my mind. So that's why I kind of wanted to write a more Western feel, because I love the genre, but I was getting a bit tired of seeing the same women in the same roles. Godless does quite well at that. There's a couple of characters in there that do transcend their normal patterns or normal kind of paths that those characters would take. But yeah.
Is there again, I'll be careful how I phrase this, but no, is there a risk though that, you know, Westerns being set, you know, back then in the 1800s or whatever, obviously society was different structurally. So, you know, is there a danger that if stories lean too heavily into, you know, empowered female stories or whatever, that then people will start to say, well, that's not accurate. That couldn't have happened because X, Y, and Z.
People love saying that,
yeah,
but don't necessarily know the history.
Yeah,
I think they have their idea of the history because of what they've consumed in pop culture, but unless obviously they're historians and have really read around that area. But you know, for the gold rush, there are stories of women mining and striking it rich and doing everything in the same way as the men did, and similarly with other westerns, because the book I finished recently and have just delivered, that is a much more traditional western about homesteaders and cowboys and bandits and all of that fun stuff. But there were women in all of those areas doing their thing, and I think because of the actual time it was taking place, which for the gold rush was at the very, very end of the 19th century, and for most westerns it's around 1880, 1860 to 1900, around then, the women's rights were in a very different place than they were otherwise. Like, women could hold property, they could inherit, their money was theirs, especially in the UK. So there was seeing this bigger class of women, independent women emerging. For example, the book that I've just finished is about a female homesteader, and the Homesteading Act in America, which is the one where you could go to get 160 acres for free, and then you work it, and then you get given the land deed for it. Single women could go and get that themselves. They could go and they could become landowners. They had to do the exact same thing as the men. Married women couldn't do it because married women are a different sort of status in the world, but single women could, and they did. And about 16 to 20% of all homesteads that were claimed at that time were by single women. And they had a much better success rate at proving up and getting their land than the men did.
See, I mean, that's fascinating. And of course, as you say, it's not something that is widely known. And in fact, and there's a myth that has been laid on top of that to suppress that story and, you know, push women's rights back, which, you know, if you bring it forward to today, it's quite scary, because I think there's this idea that civilization is always moving forward, essentially, and once you have something, then you know, it's hard to regress back. But it shows that, you know, what was that wasn't you know, maybe 200 years ago, not even, and suddenly they did regress back, obviously, before they then had to fight again for their rights. So it's I'm always amazed. I've said this to Tarek before about sort of how close in history the Western period was when you think about it. You know, it's only a few generations ago people were shooting each other on the street and all of this sort of stuff. It's a bit mad to me that it's so close,
especially America.
In America, that's what I mean.
America was such a strange one, because you had, at that time, the kind of end of the 19th century, you had New York being this, and the cities being these booming Victorian powerhouses. They had the latest technology, they had everything. And then, you know, you had the Texas and Colorado and New Mexico, were the Wild West, and they were shacks, and everything was made of wood, and it was different eras in the same country that I suppose is in every country. You know, it's in the UK as well, with sort of the big cities and the rural areas. But it was so, you know, when the Wild West was happening, they were writing these pulp novels about it and selling them in the cities to be this, look at this amazing time that's happening right now, you know, 1,000 miles.
That is mental, I hadn't actually
really strange.
thought about that before. That's true.
I read there's a account on Blue Sky that I randomly saw and started following. I can't remember what it's called, Western something, but there was a thread about Wyatt Earp and how he, in his lifetime, was turned into some sort of heroic figure via the movies. But in fact, when you actually look at what he actually did, he wasn't heroic in any way whatsoever. But it was a completely fictional thing. But you know, nowadays when people think of Wyatt Earp, they think of Tombstone, they think of you know,
they
all
did
of
the
that
same
sort of stuff.
with the Outlaws. People like Jesse James were completely. He was a horrific man. He murdered lots of people. He was an absolute shit. But he became this completely romantic folk hero like Robin Hood, and in his lifetime, and it's a very strange era to be writing in. Even though the Rush is not exactly there, it has the same kind of feel to it of this new lawless land. But yeah, the book that I've just written is all about that era. So I'll come back in a year and talk about that one.
Excellent. No, I find this stuff fascinating.
And it all ties into like you know, how accurate or authentic do you want to be when you're writing something like this? Like, do you? I mean, because I, as someone who doesn't know the accurate history, my touchstones are more media based, so it's films and video games and books and stuff, and that's my and so I, you know, as long as it feels authentic to me, that's great. And it might be completely wildly inaccurate, but I have no idea. But then it sounds like for you, you've got these media touchstones that you look at, but you're also doing a lot of research into the reality of what it was like. So do you combine? Do you kind of pick a bit of both worlds and make it accurate, but also feel modern?
Yeah, usually I would look at the media stuff, so the TV shows, the video games, movies, for a visual cue on what things looked like, so I can describe them in an accurate way. You know, the kind of this is the type of clothing that they would have worn, for instance, and then I will double check it with some research to make sure I'm not calling it the wrong thing, or that chaps actually weren't invented at that time, or that kind of thing. But usually I look at that for the visual side of things, but then I'll try and find as many primary sources as I can for voice, again, because of getting the way that people spoke back then. And the kind of, because, you know, you read contemporary Victorian novels that were written, you know, Dickens and stuff, the way they're written is so different to the way we write now, or the way that somebody writing a Victorian novel writes now. So I usually try and look for that, and I found a couple of really, really good ones for The Rush. Luckily, obviously, the Kate, who's based on a journalist called Emma Kelly, she was a journalist, so she wrote a lot of things about her time in the Gold Rush, and she wrote this amazing account of her trip, and it was in Lippincott's Monthly. And thank God for, I know it's probably bad to say, but Internet Archive for having the scan of that very magazine and finding the exact page and reading it. And the way she writes about that experience is beautiful, and you can't emulate that in any other kind of media, and finding out these little tidbits of things that she did that can inform my character, because she's so based on her. This Emma Kelly, she was by herself with her dog, and she just hopped on boats with groups of gold mining men and was taken to the gold fields. And there was a thing that if there's a section of the river that you have to go on called the White Horse Rapids, and they are very, very dangerous, and they flip boats and people lose everything in an instant, and it's very dramatic. So I Google mapped it and found it and saw what it looked like. And then women were not allowed to go on the rapids. Well, they had to get off the boat and walk around, basically, and walk over this big hill and meet their men on the other side. But Emma Kelly refused to do that. She was like, I'm going to run these rapids, because if you're doing it, I'm going to do it. So her and her dog got in the boat, and she became the first woman to run the rapids. She smacked her head doing it and nearly died, but she did do it. And then she got off at the other end, walked back, got on another boat and did it again, because she enjoyed it so much. So she became the first woman to ride the rapids twice as well, for fun. So there are things like that you find in research that are just absolute gold, no pun intended. That make it into the book, which just makes it, I think, that it's that kind of thing for me that makes a historical novel more authentic than sort of exacting research into the type of skillet that was used to cook them.
Yeah.
It's what matters to me is the character experience is authentic.
Yeah, I think that's right. And yeah, that's certainly what I look for when I read historical novels, is you want it to feel real, and those little details can make it feel real.
Yeah.
But whether something happened on an exact date, unless it's like key to the story or whatever, then is late. That seems to be less important to me. And so The Rush is coming out. You're working on another Western as well, but in your day job, you also work with comics and stuff like that. I mean, would you like to work in different mediums and try your hand at film or TV, for example?
I would love to try and write a script, I think, but I think I'm quite a visual writer. People have called my books cinematic quite a lot, so I would love to try that medium, but I would not like to write comics or board games or anything like that. That's very much not me. Novels are my key medium. I don't even like writing short stories. They're too hard. They're much harder than a novel.
Yeah.
Is spending time working with comics and board games, is that and it's kind of seeing the reality of it, I suppose, of being a comic book writer, for instance, is that put you off it at all, or is it something that you would have maybe wanted to do before having experience of it?
No, not really, because I'm not a big comic reader. It's going to sound really bad, but I don't like being shown what something looks like when I'm reading it. Okay. I like keeping it in my brain. I like the description and the kind of the kind of theatre of the mind type thing, that goes on.
Okay. The opposite of a comic book, basically.
Yeah, exactly. While I completely appreciate comic books for their art, which is absolutely stunning, and they're a media of their own, and I think that they're wonderful, but not my bread and butter for being a writer.
Fair enough. So, we've got The Rush coming out in June. Mm-hmm. You've got your next book, which you've kind of another Western, more kind of classical Western vibes, coming out next year.
Well, I don't know.
Or
what they say.
Don't know when it's coming. Okay, but that's your next one.
Yep.
Scheduled. What else are you working on at the moment that you can talk about? Anything else?
So, except for that, now that I finished that and delivered that, I have had a bit of a break. But the book that I'm working on right now is a secret book under pseudonym. I'm not allowed to talk about that one, but the Western one, yeah, that one is very much my take on a Western, and it's all from the point of view of the women of the time. One of them was a sheriff, a homesteader, and an outlaw, and how they all come together in their it very much Godless was a touchstone for that one.
Okay, nice.
Yeah,
excellent.
Yeah,
look forward to that one as well. What was the last book that you read?
the last book that I've read was it's called These Wicked Devices by Matthew Blampin, who is a brilliant historical writer. It's set in the make sure I get it right, actually, 1630s Rome, 1650s Rome, and it's all about the kind of machinations of this woman, Donna Olympia, who was the kind of right hand of Pope Innocent X, and it's wonderfully tricksy and it's beautifully written book. So
that sounds good. What was that called? That sounds like
These Wicked Devices.
These Wicked
I was going to say
Devices.
that's your jam right there, Marco.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a really good one.
What about the last film that you watched?
The last film that I watched. I don't know. What was the last film I watched? That's a horrible question.
It's you could have watched it last night and it would be impossible to remember what it was.
I watched the A Simple Favor with.
Oh yeah, is that any good? I've not seen that. I know this.
It is really funny. We watched it in preparation for watching the sequel.
Okay.
But it's really, really funny and a very good satire on that domestic noir thriller type, genre. Nice. Missing women, lots of secrets and stuff like that.
Cool.
So, yeah, really, really good.
And what about TV? What are you watching on TV at the moment?
We are watching Yellowstone and Arcane.
Arcane's great.
Arcane was good. Yeah. I've not watched season 2 yet of Arcane. I need to.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah,
we're on our second watch through of it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Yellowstone, I was like probably addicted to that. Like it really, I couldn't stop watching it. We've finished it off, and then I'm not watching the spin-off ones yet. But yeah, loved
I've watched the 1883 spin-off, which is the first settling in that place, and that's really good. That was also
the Harrison Ford one.
No, that's 1923.
Okay.
That's the one I want to watch next.
Right.
It's Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren.
I know,
shooting
great cast. Yeah.
It's like great. Yep. Done well there.
Well, the very, very last thing we always do is a super quick fire either or. There's no right answer apart from one of them at the end.
No right answer.
No
You
right
meant to say
answer,
no
yes.
wrong answer.
But yeah, it's a good point. There's no wrong answer, no right answer. I always say there's no right answer. Is that the wrong way of saying it?
You could say it any way you want.
It's the same thing, isn't it? There's no right or wrong answer. But let's go for Wyatt Earp, Kurt Russell or Kevin Costner?
Kevin Costner. I like Kevin Costner, mainly because I'm watching Yellowstone.
TV or cinema?
TV.
Night Owl or Early Bird?
Early Bird. Definitely.
Oh yeah, of course, you're 5 a.m.
Music or no music when you write?
Music, but no words. Instrumental music.
Red Dead Redemption soundtrack?
I have soundtracks for every book that I write, and the one that I just went for the Western is all Yellowstone, 1883, True Grit, things like that.
Nice. And the last one, paper book or ebook?
Paper.
Yeah, I know. That was
all day, every day.
Oh, okay, what if I ask you audiobook or ebook?
Oh, ebook.
Oh, okay.
I find audiobooks, I tend to fall asleep when I'm being told the story.
So I'll take that as a win. We'll edit out the first answer and we'll just do that. 'Cause nobody ever picks books. Everyone's always paper books. So.
Excellent.
Yep.
Well, thanks very much, Beth. That was great.
No, thank you. It was really good to chat.
Well, thanks very much to Beth for coming on. I really enjoyed that chat. And, as I said at the start, I just find it fascinating talking about that period and finding out the truth of that period, because it's a period of time that has been, that most people know through the stories of Hollywood that are told.
Yeah.
And, I mentioned there, I read a fascinating thing about Wyatt Earp and how he was far from this great and good lawman that he is portrayed to be in the movies and stuff like that. And, a lot of these people are sort of romanticized, and while others, like many of the women that were involved, are just sort of written out of history in a way.
It is fascinating. I mean, it's something which I think you see happening now, isn't it? The way that history gets rewritten and in real time almost, sometimes it feels like, and how the focus shifts very soon after events. And I think when you look at Westerns and historical stuff especially, I think it's a great example of proper characters, proper lawlessness that is then brushed under the carpet very easily by the passage of time. And as you say, especially when it comes to the actions of men and the actions of women, especially, who have just kind of been vanished. Whenever I think of a Western, I always think of a man on horseback shooting a gun. It's always it is that Hollywood image, right? It's definitely been pushed like that. So
and it's an image that today's, some of today's, without getting political, but some of today's political figures like to portray as the real. That's what a real man is. And the fact is that wasn't ever what it was actually like anyway. It's a made up thing.
And I mean, even Westerns, even that whole time zone. We said in the podcast there as well. Yeah. At the same point, you've got like New York, and Victoria and London, etc. All these advancements being made in this kind of civilization, as they would view it, society, and then you go like 100 miles, or whatever, into the middle of America, and it's just lawless. Yeah,
people
wasteland.
Walking down the street and shooting each other.
It's fascinating.
It's mad, and it's it's not that far back in time.
No, it's not at all.
But thanks to Beth for coming on to the podcast. You can pick up The Rush, which, as you say, Tarek, is a great book. You can pick that up now. We'll put a link in the podcast description. Next week, as I've said on recent episodes, we have recorded a lot of episodes recently with people whose books or work is out at the same time, roughly. So we are next week is another double episode week from Page One.
Wow, lucky listeners!
Two great guests coming on.
Yeah, we do indeed. The first of which is Mr. Jonathan Lee. He's coming onto the podcast on Wednesday. Well, I say coming on. He's been on, but you'll hear his episode on Wednesday. He is perhaps best known for the very excellent recent docudrama. Is that what you call it? Like a drama based on real events? Is that a real word?
So, yeah.
But it's called The Bombing of Pan Am 103, and it was a really fantastic show about the Lockerbie bombing. And so it's something which he's been involved in, and he's he's been involved in. He wasn't involved in the Lockerbie bombing. He was involved in the docudrama around it.
I hope not.
But it's a great chat, because he's someone who's written a bunch of books and he's moved very much into the TV film stuff.
So and we hear about the differences in working in those different worlds and things like
that.
So
that's right.
It's a really fascinating and fun chat again. So please do tune in for that one. And then on Friday
we are chatting with the wonderful Amelia Blackwell, whose debut adult book is A Crime Through Time, and it's a really cool premise. The setup is essentially Georgina Darcy from Pride and Prejudice finding a modern day object in the woods, being transported to 1995, where a film crew shooting a Jane Austen adaptation. So just as really awesome meta
and time
kind
travel and
really, really cool. Really cool setup.
It sounds like a lot of fun. So that's another great episode. So please do tune in for that one. As I mentioned at the start, we have launched a Step podcast. Please do subscribe on social media to those, so you can keep up to date with all of the shows across the network, including ours, obviously. And do tune in and subscribe to Adventures in Publishing Land as well. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please do take the time to rate and review us on your favourite podcast app, as that helps us to continue to get great guests on the podcast.
And of course, if you would like to get in touch, you can always drop us an email to podcast@rightgear.co.uk, or find us on pretty much all the usual good social media platforms. Just search for @UK Page One. Go into our YouTube channel, look at all those wonderful shows we've got. Go into the State Network podcast YouTube page.
Yes.
So all those shows there.
State Podcasts on YouTube, if you want to find us there, or
Leave us
on
some
social
comments.
media as well, @State Podcasts.
Yes,
So,
we've got a lot. I'm going to start writing down all the
I know you
different
are.
places.
You
that
can't
find
even
us at.
remember at
I
UK.
can barely keep up
Page
with
One,
it.
so this is going to be a disaster for Tarek. But yeah, and obviously do tune into the other shows on the network as well. The conversation with Nadine Matheson and Coffee Break as well, because she's got some great guests on there as well. In fact, this week she also had her Coffee Break show featured Beth as well.
That's right. It's a Beth off. This
It
week.
is, yeah, double Beth.
May the
but
Beth
yeah,
podcast win. I made
that
up
was
now.
terrible.
I like that. It's good.
Terrible. But yeah, otherwise, have a great week, and we will speak to you next episode.
See you later.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode like these ones down here.
And if you want to get in touch, you can do so by finding us on our social media platforms up here, or drop us a comment way down below there.
But otherwise, thanks for listening and join us for the next episode.
See you later.